At 5:27 local time, the carrier strike group moves steadily through open water. No alarms, no radio noise, just the deep mechanical pulse of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier carving a clean path across the sea. Inside the Combat Information Center, the room is dim. Consoles glow softly. Sonar operators sit perfectly still, headphones sealed tight, eyes fixed on rolling spectrograms that most people would dismiss as meaningless static. Then something appears. Not a sound exactly. A pattern. A faint repeating frequency rises from below the thermal layer, too measured for surface traffic, too precise for marine life. It is subtle, almost courteous, like a quiet knock on a steel door. At first, the sonar operator says nothing. He watches the pattern settle into consistency. Then he leans forward. New subsurface contact bearing 187. The room does not react immediately. Not yet. On the display, the contact holds depth, speed, and course. That is the first warning sign. Random noise drifts, currents shift, marine life pulses, and disappears. This contact does none of that. It is deliberate. The supervisor steps in behind the operator, studying the frequency bands. He does not touch the console. He does not interrupt. He simply listens. Track passive, he says calmly. No active ping. Across the CIC, data begins to merge. Towed array inputs from the escorts feed into the picture. Nothing loud, nothing aggressive. Just enough to outline a shadow where no shadow should be. The contact remains below the layer, using temperature and salinity to bend sound away from the surface. A classic move. Old school. Effective. But something is wrong. The blade rate is off, too clean, too evenly spaced. This is not a merchant ship, not a research vessel, and definitely not something lost at sea. The operator marks it again. Contact is matching course. Speed steady, depth unchanged, matching course. That is no coincidence. That is shadowing. On the bridge, the officer of the deck receives the update without visible reaction. The carrier does not change speed. It does not turn. There is no dramatic response. That too is intentional. Carriers do not flinch. But behind the scenes, the strike group begins to breathe differently. One escort widens slightly on the starboard quarter. Another adjusts speed by less than a knot. From the surface, the changes are nearly invisible. Below it, they mean everything. The submarine responds. The sonar trace sharpens. Not louder, clearer. The contact makes a slight correction, tightening its geometry against the carrier's path. It wants to stay exactly where it is. It wants to be sensed, not fully heard. This is no longer simple observation. This is a signal. In the CIC, the tactical action officer steps closer to the plot. Classification? The answer comes carefully. Nuclear-powered submarine. High confidence. Nationality unknown. No assumptions, just facts. The submarine remains passive, but its behavior says enough. It is close enough to be noticed, close enough to make a point, but not close enough to cross the line. Yet the minutes pass, and the contact holds. The distance slowly closes as both formations continue on course. Then, without warning, the spectrogram spikes. A brief emission. One sharp, active sonar pulse. It slices through the water like lightning in a dark room. Short, precise, unmistakable. Every operator freezes. An active sonar pulse carries one clear message. I know where you are. It is not random. It is directed, controlled, intentional. The tactical action officer does not raise his voice. Log the pulse. Timestamp, bearing, no reply. No escalation. The carrier group absorbs the message in silence. But below the surface, the equation has changed. The submarine has spoken openly. And in doing so, it has revealed more than it meant to. The contact begins a slow acceleration, barely noticeable, but enough to disturb the water around its hull. Cavitation creeps into the edges of the signature like breath clouding cold glass. It is changing position, not retreating, not closing in recklessly. Testing. Inside the CIC, a quiet certainty settles over the room. The data is no longer ambiguous. The geometry is clear. The intent is no longer theoretical. The commander below believes he holds the advantage. What he does not know, what he cannot know, is that above him, the carrier strike group has already begun to close the box, silently and methodically. No shouted orders, no dramatic displays, just a calm, irreversible shift in posture. And deep beneath the thermal layer, the submarine waits, confident, patient, unaware that this very moment is the closest it will ever come to holding the upper hand. The contact does not fade, it does not drift, it does not break away. It stays exactly where it is, just below the thermal layer, just outside what would be considered reckless proximity. That alone confirms intent. Inside the Combat Information Center, the sonar team refines the track. Passive only. No noise, no emotion, just disciplined listening. The frequency profile stabilizes. The propulsion system is nuclear. The harmonics are smooth, no irregular cavitation. This is not an aging diesel boat searching its way through shallow water. This is a purpose-built submarine operating exactly as intended, and it is growing more confident. Contact adjusting bearing, the operator reports. Intercept geometry tightening. That is the phrase that changes everything. An intercept course is not observation. It is positioning. It means the commander below is no longer content to follow. He wants to shape the angle, shape the distance, shape the story. On the surface, however, nothing appears different. The carrier continues straight ahead. Flight operations continue without interruption. From above, the ship looks almost indifferent. That is intentional. A carrier that reacts too visibly gives away leverage, so it doesn't. Instead, the answer comes from the escorts. One destroyer eases farther outward, stretching the perimeter. Another shifts half a mile forward, subtle enough that no civilian radar would ever notice. But beneath the waves, those small movements redraw the entire acoustic battlefield. And the submarine notices immediately. The sonar trace shows it at once. Tiny changes in depth, fractional speed corrections. The contact is no longer dictating the situation. It is reacting. That is the second mistake. A submarine that starts reacting is exposing its decision cycle, its timing, its confidence, its command rhythm. One escort's towed array begins delivering a cleaner picture, not because the submarine has become louder, but because it has drifted into a position where silence is no longer enough. The water itself is no longer working in its favor. Then comes the moment no one was expecting, a second sonar pulse, shorter than the first, narrower, more focused. This one is not exploratory, it is confirmatory. The pulse moves across the carrier's acoustic shadow and returns with a sharp, unmistakable echo. For a brief instant, the submarine believes it has gained a clearer picture. What it does not realize is that clarity works both ways. Inside the CIC, the plot updates immediately. Bearing refined, range tightened, confidence rising. No one celebrates. This is not a victory, it is a threshold. The tactical action officer leans closer to the display. He's declaring presence, he says quietly. He wants us to know he's here. And that changes everything. The submarine is no longer concealing itself. Now it is signaling, and signaling creates pressure. Pressure invites a response. But the response still does not arrive as noise. Instead, the strike group quietly broadens its awareness. An ASW helicopter is placed on alert status. Not launched, just prepared. Sonobuoys are positioned but not deployed. Every move is measured. Every option remains open. Meanwhile, the submarine continues its slow maneuver. It slides laterally, attempting to hold position along the carrier's beam. A risky place to remain, a position meant to say, I could be closer if I chose to be. The sonar operator watches the trace tighten again. Contact maintaining parallel course. Parallel, that is not accidental. That is a challenge written in geometry. On the bridge, the captain is briefed in seconds. He listens, gives a single nod, and looks forward again. No change in speed, no change in heading. Let the submarine make the next move. Below the surface, the contact hesitates. For the first time, its speed fluctuates slightly. Half a knot up, then back down. A probing move, a test. The answer is silence. But silence is not the same as inaction. Across the formation, sensors are speaking to one another. Data layers merge. What was once only a shadow is becoming a shape. What was once suspicion is now a track with memory. The submarine commander is still confident. He believes he has introduced uncertainty. He believes the carrier now has to account for him. What he does not understand is that the uncertainty has already shifted. It is no longer with the surface group. It is with him. Because the moment a submarine chooses to be noticed, the moment it announces itself, it gives up its greatest advantage. And once that advantage is gone, only three things remain: distance, geometry, and time. And all three are beginning to turn against him. The carrier strike group does not respond the way the submarine expects. There is no sudden turn, no burst of speed, no active sonar reply. From below, it may look like hesitation. It is not. What the submarine commander cannot see is the quiet adjustment taking place across every layer: surface, subsurface, and air. Each one subtle on its own. Together, they form a tightening net. The first shift is geometric. One escort moves forward, not toward the contact, but beyond it. Another eases outward, widening the acoustic perimeter. To an untrained eye, it would look like routine station keeping. To a submarine relying on passive sensors, it feels like pressure with no obvious source. Inside the Combat Information Center, the plot settles into something far more dangerous than uncertainty. It becomes predictable. Contact speed steady, the sonar operator reports. Depth unchanged. Unchanged depth means comfort. It means the submarine still believes the layer is protecting it. That belief is no longer accurate. The water column here is complicated. Stacked gradients, shifting thermoclines, uneven acoustic behavior. The layer still bends sound, but not consistently. Not anymore. The submarine has drifted into a pocket where remaining quiet costs more than moving. A towed array begins to sing, not loudly but clearly. The contact's propulsion harmonics separate from the background like ink spreading through water. No announcement is made. The picture simply improves. The tactical action officer studies the display. The track now has weight, momentum, history. It is no longer just a snapshot. It is a behavior pattern, and patterns can be anticipated. Above deck, an MH-60R helicopter is brought into position. The rotors remain still. No launch order yet, just readiness. That alone begins to change the equation below the surface. The submarine adjusts again. Another slight course correction, still trying to maintain relative position off the carrier's beam. It wants the psychological advantage, the sense of proximity, the impression of control. What it does not realize is that proximity without room to maneuver becomes vulnerability. Then the helicopter lifts off, quietly. No sudden rush, no spectacle. Just enough altitude to clear the deck before slipping into a low orbit miles away from the carrier's visible center line. It does not deploy sonar, it does not transmit, it listens. The aircraft's sensors do not replace the ships below, they complete them. What the surface ships hear in fragments, the helicopter hears in context. The submarine feels the difference. Not the helicopter itself, but the shift in the acoustic environment around it. Reflections change. Background noise behaves differently. The ocean no longer sounds familiar. For the first time, the contact increases speed by more than half a knot. That is no longer purely tactical. That is instinct. The commander below knows something has changed. He does not yet know what. But he knows the balance is no longer what it was only minutes earlier. Inside the CIC, the update is immediate. Contact accelerating. Course deviation 5 degrees starboard. The submarine is no longer holding geometry. Now it is searching. The helicopter drops slightly lower and releases a single passive sonobuoy. Not directly over the contact, but offset. Placed where the water itself can do the work. No pulse, no signal. Just listening. The buoy reports back almost immediately. Clean, stable, confirmed. No one in the room reacts outwardly. There is no applause, no visible satisfaction, only a quiet nod from the acoustic supervisor. The track tightens once again. The submarine makes another adjustment. This time, it goes deeper. It slips beneath the layer it had trusted, hoping depth will restore uncertainty. It does not. Down here, the water is colder, denser, sound travels farther. The very move meant to blur its outline only sharpens it. The helicopter completes a wide arc, staying just outside what the submarine would consider overtly threatening. No aggressive posture, no intimidation, just presence. The destroyers hold their positions, no one rushes, no one presses in, there is no need anymore. The tactical picture is complete. The submarine is now inside a box it never realized was there, defined not by weapons, but by physics and patience. Inside the CIC, the tactical action officer speaks quietly. He's no longer shaping this encounter. No one argues. Below the surface, the submarine commander still believes he is testing a carrier strike group. What he does not know is that the test ended minutes ago. The only question left is how long it will take him to realize that the direction of the hunt has already changed. Then the submarine makes its move. At first, it is subtle. A small increase in speed, measured in fractions of a knot, just enough to alter the water flow along the hull, just enough to push against geometry it no longer controls. Inside the Combat Information Center, the change is immediate. Contact accelerating, the sonar operator reports. Cavitation beginning at the edges. That single word changes the atmosphere in the room. Cavitation means turbulence. Turbulence means noise. Noise means exposure. The commander below believes speed will create distance. It is a reasonable assumption, one taught to generations of submariners. But this is no longer open water. This is managed space. The acceleration sharpens the acoustic signature instantly. What had once been a smooth, disciplined frequency now breaks into layered harmonics. The propellers remain controlled, but the water can no longer conceal them. The contact is no longer a possibility. It is a certainty. The helicopter receives the update and adjusts altitude by less than 50 feet. No rush, no dramatic turn, just enough to refine the listening angle. Then the order comes. One word, active. A single active sonar pulse drops into the water. It is not aggressive. It is not prolonged. It is precise. Short duration, narrow beam, perfect timing. The sound moves outward, strikes the submarine's hull, and returns clean. There is no ambiguity now. Bearing locked. Range confirmed. Depth resolved. For the first time since the encounter began, the submarine is fully visible, acoustically exposed in all 3 dimensions. And still, the room remains calm. No weapons are prepared, no launch authority is requested. Because this is not about destruction, it is about control. The sonar pulse was not meant to chase, it was meant to announce. Below the surface, the submarine commander understands immediately. The sound is unmistakable, controlled, confident, and close. He knows exactly what it means. The illusion is over. Now the submarine reacts with urgency. Speed increases again, crossing the threshold where silence is no longer possible. Cavitation spreads along the hull like white noise tearing through discipline. It turns hard, attempting to break the box, choosing direction over concealment. That is the mistake. The moment it commits to the turn, the geometry collapses. The destroyer on the forward arc tightens its angle. The helicopter shifts to preserve coverage. Passive buoys confirm what the active pulse already revealed. There is nowhere to go that is not being watched. Inside the CIC, the tactical action officer gives the assessment. He's trying to exit. He's late. There is no triumph in his voice, only fact. The submarine slows not because it wants to, but because it has to. More speed only makes the situation worse. Every added knot creates more noise. Every turn creates more data. Every passing second strengthens the picture forming above. At last, the commander below chooses the only option left. Disengagement, speed drops, course steadies, the signature stabilizes. A controlled withdrawal. The strike group does not pursue aggressively. It does not crowd the submarine. It does not rush after it. It simply lets it leave. But it never stops watching. For several more minutes, the contact is tracked as it withdraws. Its signature still clear, still cataloged, still unmistakable. Only when the distance grows large enough that geometry no longer favors either side does the posture begin to relax. The helicopter returns to the carrier. The destroyers resume their original spacing. The ocean settles back into its quiet rhythm. No torpedoes are launched. No warning shots are fired. No announcements are made. And yet the outcome is absolute. The submarine challenged a carrier strike group and learned in real time the limits of initiative in contested water. Because the biggest mistake was not being detected. The biggest mistake was believing that detection itself meant danger. What it actually meant was something far more final. The encounter was effectively decided the moment the submarine chose to be noticed. Everything after that was simply physics doing what physics does. By the time the submarine slips beyond effective range, nothing on the surface appears different. The carrier holds course. Flight operations continue. Radios remain quiet. From the outside, it looks as though nothing happened. That illusion is the final lesson. Encounters like this are not measured by blasts or headlines. They are measured by control, of space, of information, of time. And from the first passive trace to the final confirmed withdrawal, that control never left the carrier strike group. The submarine believed proximity created leverage. It believed operating near a carrier would impose uncertainty. That belief is understandable. Submarines are built to exploit invisibility, to force surface forces into reaction. But that doctrine depends on one fragile condition: remaining unseen. The moment the submarine announced itself, through geometry, through maneuver, through that first active sonar pulse, it gave up the only advantage that truly mattered. From then on, it was no longer a hunter. It was a variable. And carrier strike groups are built to absorb variables. They do not depend on a single sensor, a single ship, or a single decision maker. They operate as layered systems, each element overlapping the next, each weakness covered by another capability. Surface ships listen long before they speak. Aircraft extend reach without revealing intent. Data fuses quietly until uncertainty collapses under its own weight. The submarine never faced one opponent. It faced a network. That network did not rush. It did not escalate emotionally. It did not need to. Time was already working in its favor. Every minute the submarine remained nearby, it fed the system more information. Blade rates, turning behavior, acceleration thresholds, reaction times. All of it observed, all of it recorded. What the commander below experienced as pressure was from the surface simply patience. That is why there was no pursuit when the submarine disengaged. No effort to dramatize the advantage, no show of force. Because the objective had already been achieved. The carrier was not protected by luck or intimidation. It was protected by inevitability, by the physics of sound, by the mathematics of geometry, by the discipline of crews trained to let the environment do the work. In modern naval warfare, dominance is not always loud. Often, it is nearly invisible. The submarine departed with its hull intact, but it did not leave empty-handed. It carried something back with it: certainty. Certainty about where the line is. Certainty about who controls the encounter once that line is crossed. And certainty about how little room there is for error when challenging a force designed not to react impulsively, but to endure. Back inside the Combat Information Center, the logs are finalized, timestamps verified, acoustic files archived, another encounter recorded, not as an anomaly but as confirmation. The ocean returns to baseline, but the lesson remains. Carriers are not protected by escorts alone. They are protected by restraint, by coordination, and by the understanding that modern naval power does not need to prove itself through destruction to be decisive. Sometimes the most important outcome is the one that leaves behind no debris, no wreckage, no casualties, and no unanswered questions. Just a quiet withdrawal, and a clear reminder that challenging a carrier strike group is rarely about courage or raw capability. It is about understanding the rules of a contest in which silence speaks first and very often last.